Let's write our block entity system in our Jiralib library. Hello everyone, this is Andy Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Now, before I start implementing the block entity class, I need to overview what we have so far and how we will do things, because from here on, I will dissect what Turtivorti had implemented and I will tweak them because I think his use case is special and he's doing it for his own mod. However, we want to make sure that we are creating proper flexible library. Now, we had 4 different interfaces and 4 different block entities. iTick is all responsible of ticking the block entity and handling the tick logic. Now, as you see, I added the default implementation for tick client so that when we import it inside any class, it won't yell us about implementing this method. And as you see, there is nothing special here. We just call the tick method or tick client method, and we have a helper method for get the state. Then we have the updatable. Now, updatable classes will be responsible of syncing themselves between client and server. And as you see, again, I added the default implementation for client, and we have a method called update, and we will have something called on tick end. This will happen at the end of each tick. iSync is different. iSync is responsible of syncing the inventories between the client and server each tick. So if I don't have any inventory, I will not implement iSync. And as you see, again, I added the default implementation for the get syncables, and I'm returning an empty list. Now I have a combo. A block entity can tick and can sync separated to each other. For example, a chest will not tick. It only has an inventory because tick is responsible of calculating something each tick, and a chest doesn't need to calculate anything. So normally a chest would not have a tick method. On the other side, it will have the sync method because it has an inventory. Some block entities like my goose does not have inventories, but they need to tick. So we have to have the iSync, we have to have the iTick, but there are machines, and machines will contain inventories and they would need to tick. So we have produced this interface, iSynced tick, for machines actually. And here you see that we had onTick and the onTick client, but I added a Boolean method without any body because we want to make sure that we return something here, and that is should sync. Now, in the method of tick, we are checking to call the tick method of ourselves, and then we should go and check if we should sync, and then the syncables are not returning null and are not returning an empty list. We call this sync on those syncables. And then if we are updatable, please call the on tick end. Okay. And finally, we have the tick client that will just call the on tick client. And if we are updatable, we call the update. Now, as you notice, I'm not binding the update to anything because update is completely separate concept. Now, why did I add it here? Because if you know, we have these block properties, and block properties can have a private boolean should sync, and by default it will be false. Okay, now I want to make sure that I have the set for them, so I will copy this, paste, and I will call it should actually is syncable, and by default I will call this dot should sync to be true and return that. I will have an overload that accepts a boolean, and I will call it should sync. And finally, I will have a getter for that. So should sync returns should sync. Now, using this part in our properties, now we can retrieve that in this method and return the value. And that is why we have it there. Okay, so you may ask, hey, if we are using something like for each here, why are we checking for the null? Well, if you look at for each, it says requires non-null. And this means that if the object that we are looping through is null, we will have an exception. Although it uses a for, and normally you wouldn't need this section to check if it's empty or not. But I think it's a little bit of an optimization considering that this will happen 20 times a second. So why should we loop through some list? Anyways, that's iSync tick. Now, we have four different classes. We have a base class. This is our very base class that implements the block entity. It's updatable and it's tickable. Then we have another one that has the end tick logic. We have one that is only updatable but produces a GUI. And then we have one that is working on the end tick and is producing a GUI. If you notice, this should end tick is being used here. It is possible for us to add should tick end, or I don't know, we will call it something, inside our block properties, and inside our new instance of our block entities. We don't need to have two implementations for this, and we'll just read it from the properties. So let's add that. Again, I don't know what to call it. Should and tick, should wait and tick. It's false by default. Then we have this overload that says wait and tick, and we say this dot should wait and tick equals to true. I will cut it, I will paste it here. Then I have an overload like this, change the method name, change the parameter name, and then we have should wait and tick that is coming from the properties. Okay, now we can process forward. Now here is the thing. The very basic block entity should be a block entity that is updating itself. It may not tick. So I will write a new Java class and I will call it GBaseBE. GBaseBE is extending block entity and is updatable. And that's it. Okay. And I'm not putting it as abstract because I want to see what I should handle. It's update and on end tick, and then we need a constructor. So on the update, we need this dirty thing. Then we need this section. And this one will have protected BE properties, and we call it properties. And in constructor, we say properties equals to new properties of this as the block entity. So instead of this guy, now we say if this dot properties dot should wait and tick, the rest is the same. So on the on and tick, we will get this guy and we will paste it. Now here's the thing. To update packet to initialize chunk is exactly what we need for updating. Okay, so I will paste it there. And this is GBase. I want to rename it. So I will call it G updatable BE. Makes more sense. People will know that it's updatable block entity. Then on top of this block entity that is updatable, we will have a new class that is G tickable BE. Now, do I want to keep it separate? I'm producing new abstraction layers here. I'm aware of that. But the reason I'm debating on this is that actually this will be my very base class. So this will be G tickable BE. This is my main block entity. So I will have T extends G tickable BE of type T, and this extends the G updatable BE and implements I tick. Now iTick will force us to have the tick method, and that is all we want. So we will say implement method tick and create constructor, and this is the type T here. Okay, and as you notice, the G updatable BE is not accepting any sort of generics. Now what are you saying? You're saying that raw use, yes, it's wrong. We need to be G updatable BE properties. Actually, no, this now needs to have generics. So T extends G updatable BE of T, and this is called G updatable BE. Okay, what's wrong with you? Oh, the generic goes after. Okay, there we have it. So now we can accept the T here, and this is critical because now we call it as T. Now we can't have it as this. Cast the expression to be BE properties of type T. No, actually, BE properties of G update of T. That will not work. Okay, I will remove the instantiation of property. This is a little bit of a problem because here we are reading the properties. So we say if this dot properties does not equal to null and it has the value. So we should remember to assign the properties each time. I don't like it. I really don't like it. Okay, all I had to do is typecast this guy to T. And well, this will cause a warning on unchecked, but we know that it will work. So that's that. Now, as you see here, I need to fix this guy because it says raw usage. And this is exactly where this typecast can become problematic. So instead of using a raw usage, we say G tick BE, and actually it should solve itself, or I think T. Yeah, T is okay. And that will solve itself. And this call to super now goes all the way back to here. And it will send in the G tickable BE as the type, and we are typecasting it correctly because we are using the type correctly. Okay, so now that we have that, in the tick method here on the tickable, let's see, we have the update and on tick end handled here. But now we want to handle the tick method and we are not having it here. Remember, this guy is finished, I think, because we have the update on and should. Yes, this guy is done for, so we delete anyway. This guy is just reversing it, so this is done for, delete anyway. And yes, we will have problems here, but we will come back to them later. Now for stickable, we have the tick method to handle. The tick method will call on tick, and by the way, we don't have on tick yet, so I have to sit back and think about something because on tick is part of the I synced tick, and we actually handled the tick method here on the I sync tick. So instead of I tick, because this guy is already implementing I tick, why don't I use I synced tick? And yes, it will force me to implement methods. We will take a look at them later. The tick method is already handled, so we don't need that. The problem here is that, as I said, the tickable block entity is, I think I handled it here properly. Okay, so should sync will return this dot properties dot should sync, and we know that it's not null anymore, so we can use that. The sync will do nothing. It's an empty implementation so that when we work on top of things, we don't need to do that, or we may keep it and we will add things into the system. I don't know. I will wait on this because honestly, I want to make sure that I'm handling things properly. So we will go one step at a time. Now, as I said, we have properties, and properties is already having fields, tick rate, and tick logic. The only thing that I want here is a variable called ticks. In the constructor, I will say ticks equals to 0, and this is private. So actually, yes, this should remain private. It won't bother us on the extensions of this. So on tick, here we want to make sure that we are handling the initialization, okay? So this code is almost correct, I think. If the tick is equals to 0, means that this is our first real tick. Then we check if this properties tick rate equals 0 or the ticks modulus tick rate equals 0, then we know that we need to do the tick logic. But here, instead of tick logic, we are calling on tick. We can't go with on tick, on internal tick, that we don't have it. And that's it. We increment the ticks. Now, because we have this internal variable, we may want to get the ticks at some point. So we say public int get ticks. This returns the ticks. That's that one. On first tick, I think we will not do anything there, so we should add the method inside our tickable thing, and I will keep it empty, but this will be protected. You may notice that this is one of the classes that is actually written by Turtivorti, but I'm heavily modifying it now, and if I want to show you, it's the class. So you see that he has fields, he has tick logic, he has inventories, and here, for example, he is using different names, and the on tick is private. This one is different on the name. On first tick is public, and I'm making it protected. So yes, I'm heavily changing this code, at least fundamentally. So the on first tick should be handled only by the children of this library. I don't see any reason why we should have access to this on first tick outside of a block entity. This is the initialization phase, by the way. So then we have on internal tick. Again, we want to create that method, and yes, it will return void. It's internal, so it will be private. Actually, let's call this one on internal first tick and add that method. And I will tell you why we have that, and 30 is correct on that guy. The thing is that the internals will be handled here, and we will have some logic here. For example, on the internal first tick, this is where he was creating the properties, not the constructor. But I think the constructor is a better place because we want the properties to be ready even before any tick logic. So we will have a method that I did beforehand, and I did remove it, and I thought that, hey, it's not bad to have it, and we call it register default fields. So we had this method called register fields, okay? But now we have register default fields, and no, I'm not going to send anything in it. After registering the default fields, we are not going to add any fields directly by any method in here. But here's the thing, if for some reason a user wants to have his own fields, so register fields, this is why I said I had this method and I removed it. Now I want to have it again. It will be empty most of the time, but hey, we are writing an API, so that's that. Finally, we call on first tick. Now on first tick is this guy, okay? This is why we have one protected and one internal method. Basically, we are forcing ourselves to do things before the user can add his own logic here, okay? And now the same thing for on internal tick. Let me finish that one. Then we will come back and add any remaining methods. So we say if this dot properties dot tick logic does not equal null, then please call the tick, okay, logic. Here's the thing, we are just making sure that we are working on the server side, okay? This is the tick, not tick client. Now we have on tick client. On tick client, yes. Why don't we have that? Wait a minute. On tick client, why are you not showing up? Oh, we have it here, okay. So I will cut it from here, I will paste it here, and I will expand the same logic. Actually, I'm not gonna increment this number. I will have another one, and this is client ticks. So this dot client ticks equals to 0. I will have the same logic if the client ticks on internal first tick client, if the tick rate is equals 0, and tick client ticks with the tick rate equals 0, and this is tick client. And finally, we increment the client ticks. Now we have to implement this, but it's almost the same thing, almost, because on the client we are not gonna do that, and we just call on first client. That is another abstract, so that's that one. What's the problem with you is already defined in, okay, that's an override. And why are you yelling at me now? No, this shouldn't be. Oh, on first tick client, I forgot that part. So on internal tick, we will have this. We will have the client. So if the tick logic is not null, we say tick client. And on tick logic, I only had the tick. I will have tick client too, for whatever reason. And that's it. So we handled our client and server. The internal calls are done. Our first calls are done. For the server, we have to implement two methods. So again, create method that is void and create method that is void, okay? But I will cut them. I will paste them after these. Now, on register fields. Register fields is protected, and every child of this one should be able to add their own logic if they want. But register defaults. For registering defaults, now here's the thing. What 30 was doing is that in his own mod, he is adding the word to the fields. This is the fields on the block entity, actually, okay? I think so. Or it may be the properties field. Let me see. He sends in the properties field. Haha, he's not even using this field. Okay. So he's adding a word there, and then the position there. Now guess what? We are sending the word ourselves, but we are sending the block entity, okay, directly. So if we want to get the position, we can have a block pause, but this way actually is better because he's sending in the method as the getter. So each time he is reading the variable, he will read it from get. Now that I had seen how he is using his library, I'm gonna go back and guess what? I will nuke that word. And yes, we don't have u, so we won't have the word. Now what can I do here? We say if this dot fields dot contains field called world and this dot fields dot get field on the block entity. Which one of them should we use? I think this one. That is the word, and the type is word.class dot get value, that's the word for us, does not equal null, and then the word is client. Okay, so we are returning on 3 conditions here, and you see it is looking a little bit confusing, but hey, we are getting a word and we are checking if the word is not null, and we are doing it dynamically now instead of assigning a single word to these properties, and each time we want to handle it, we need to replace it. This way, we are dynamically calling that word class. So going back inside our default fields, we say this dot properties dot add dot fields, dot add field. And by the way, that's not what I wanted inside the properties. Actually, this dot fields, no, that's correct. We are adding it to the fields. Okay, so now we want to add the field. We want to have the same name without any typos, and then it asks for a default value, so it's this dot get word, or alternatively we can use the word variable. Then it needs a getter. Now getter means a factory, and here's the thing: g tickable be colon get word. This is the set. This is the getter, and finally we want a setter. Now we can't set the word ourselves. Minecraft is doing it internally, so we don't have a setter there. Okay, I will copy this, I will paste it, because now we want to have pause, and this dot pause, and here get pos position and no setter. Then we have another one, and this is cached state. So cached. Now here's the thing, this is a key. Okay, you can use it like this, cached state, or I think we can use it like this, but I will make sure that I'm sticking to what I think is programming wise correct. So we get the get cached state, and here we say it's get cached state. Again, we don't produce any setter. Now ticks, yes, I will have ticks here. This will be this dot properties. No, actually this dot ticks and get ticks, and for set we don't have any setter. Now we have get ticks somewhere, I think here, but we didn't have it for the client, so get ticks client. And now that we have ticks, we will have a client ticks, this dot client ticks and get ticks client. Then we have a tick rate. Okay, now the thing is that Turtle is doing something. He is sending tick rates from the block entity. Okay, and he is checking if this dot tick rate equals to blah blah blah. We move the tick rate to the properties. So I think we need to change this code a little bit. And by the way, here's a question. Do we really need to send in the tick rates? Why should we need to send in the tick rates? Because properties is already having the tick rate directly, so we don't need to set it in a tick rates. And by the way, it's just a getter, so we set it once and that's it. Although we now have a way to set it, and I think that's a better approach compared to how he's doing things, because we are relating to that tick rate on our untick and untick client. You know, we are relating on that tick rate. So if we are not properly setting any tick rate on the properties, then we are having problems. And by the way, here that I'm defining the properties, I want the tick rate to be 0, because this means that here we are checking if the properties tick rate equals to 0, then we will tick. If we don't do it, we may forget that. And what else do I have? Tick logic. I will not assign any tick logic here. Okay, but I will keep an eye on these things. So by default, the should sync and should tick rate are false, but let me assign them here. Dot should dot sync is syncable. We will say false. Dot wait and tick, we say false. Okay, so the very default thing is only tickable and updatable. So I don't need to assign anything here. Okay, now that we have these, the only thing remaining is that we can track the is dirty. And we are not doing it inside the updatable, but we will do it inside here because now we have the register default fields. Actually, this, let's make it protected because why not? And you will see what I'm doing here in a few seconds. So I will have a protected register default fields, and I will call it, I don't know where to call it. Okay, here's the thing. I will take this, I will add it here. This will be is dirty, and this dot is dirty, and this is the G updatable BE. Actually, instead of this, now we need to have different ways. So we say block entity goes into block entity that is dirty. That's our getter. Then for setter, we need a lambda of the block entity and the value that says block entity dot is dirty equals to the value, and that's that. However, here's the problem. Where should we call this one? Right now, I don't have any logic here that will handle things here. For tickable, we say call super.register default fields, and yes, this is an override now. So for this guy, we need to somehow make sure that we have this. Although if I cut it here, if I add it here, this will work. Okay, so that's that. And by the way, I intentionally added a method proper body here so that on the children, I will not be bothered with this guy. So we called it in the constructor, and the super here is not doing anything for us, but I will call the super on top. Okay, and I think we are done with this gtickable block entity. However, I will move things around because these are not overrides, and I prefer to have my overrides before non-override methods, like so. And then these are privates, these are protected. Let's give the protecteds first and then the privates, okay? And these are the getters, so I will move them on top, boom, like so. Okay, now we are done with this class. However, as you notice, unfair stick, register fields have the methods. Here's the thing, should I make this abstract and keep these guys as abstract, or should we just keep it as a class? I would make both of them abstract actually, here and here, but I will keep this as it is because when you have a method body, then you are sure that there is no pressure on implementing these methods on the children. Here's one thing that I am debating on how to handle right now, and that is the syncing. Because that I sync the tick, this means that I will have this sync method here and should sync. Okay, right now I'm not putting anything here. I think we are happy because this guy is handling the syncing process and calling the things for syncing, and all we are doing here is that we make sure that we have a sync method here, okay, so that you can override if you want to. And this is not just tickable now, it's sync tickable, so I need to change the name a little bit. This is g synced tickable BE. Now the only last one is the block entity that will produce a payload. And if you recall, at some point I had this extension in the videos shown that I was accepting B and T extends that, something like this, and this is B and T, but I will prefer to keep the type first, then the B and B here. This would be the, oh, what's wrong with you? Not isyncable BE. That would be IBE screen of type B. Okay, this will be the signature for a block entity that produces a payload. Now let's remove that, and save it, and we will have a new G synced tickable GUI screen synced tickable BE. Such a long name. Okay, let's paste it and just replace these with this and this. Actually, it should be there. Cut that, paste it there, remove that, and hit enter. So what did I do? I said that T extends ourself, but the class extends the G synced tickable. So now I need to construct matching super, and that's it. Because the class is abstract, I'm not being bothered with anything else. However, if you take a look, all we are doing here is just returning this, okay? Override abstract T get a screen data, and that is what we need here on the screen. So I will have it there, and this is now B, not T, because the T is ourself. and syncticable is never used. Who cares? This is a library. Finally, having 3 instead of 4, you can nuke that. And you may say, hey, you are supposed to have one single block entity that handles everything. That's not the case. The updatable BE is just a block entity that syncs itself, okay? So it's not ticking, it's not producing any payload, it's not having the needed code to handle inventories. It's just a block entity. And this block entity is updating itself, so it's syncing the data. On top of that, this is my main entry for any block entity that is handling the ticking or inventory or both. And finally, I have an extension of that one that is producing the graphic user interface. By doing it this way, I have now a very, very powerful and flexible system that will have every possible usage scenario that comes to my mind right now. But we are not done with this library yet. We have to add 2 little things, one interface and one little class into the utilities and the interface, because they will be used later in our inventory, and especially when the things are becoming interesting related to the synced thinkable BE and G-screen synced thinkable BE. Oh, those are mouthful names. G-screen synced thinkable BE. Actually, if I remove the GI, we have updatable BE, synced thinkable, and then screen sync tickable. Those are better. Those G's are not the thing that I need here. Hopefully this fixed everything. Now, although this code is not exactly how Turti had done it, but I will give credit to him, why not? Again, this is not how he dedicatedly done it, but that's the whole thing. I will give him credit, and we are done with this system and BE properties. I'm really happy with the final result. Now, here's the thing. I didn't like how I did add the word, because honestly, when you add something like that onto the properties, you are responsible of keeping track of the value. So if the word is changing, you need to constantly update the field. And I was thinking like, okay, I have to add it on the tick method when I was writing it, but then I saw how Turti had handled it, and I said, okay, that makes sense. We have a getter, why don't we use it? So now what we have in the BE properties are the things that we need to address at the start of the block entity creation. For example, we have the block entity, okay, then we have the logic actually, then we have the tick rate, then we have the fields and some flags. So if you ask me, this makes much more sense compared to having a field that we constantly need to update manually, because the responsibility of fields here is exactly that. The name is suggesting itself. It's a list of fields. Word is a field. So we have to assign it to the fields, not the property directly. And now I'm totally happy with it. Although sometimes the logic now may look a little bit more complex unneededly, but trust me, when you give yourself flexibility, it means that at some point you may want to encapsulate some complex functionality yourself. Right now, this client is all we want, and of course, we can get the word at any point if we want to. So we will have that if we want. We say public @ nullable word, and this one will give us return, and we call it the word. We call it word. First, we check if it's containing a value. If that's the case, we want to return the word. Okay, so get value. Otherwise, we want to return null. Okay, so instead of this, we say if the word does not equal to null, and here's the thing, instead of that, word is client. And that's it. As you see, we called our internal logic, and by doing that, we have fixed the more complex logic, although we now added a method call again. But hey, we were having that method call. And one single method call extra is 1 nanosecond, I think. So it's not heavily hitting the system. So if I say objects that require not null, blah, can I drop this part? This may cause null point exception, so I'm checking if it's not null yet. And this, we could then require non-null the is client. If I would remove this one, the nullable annotation, then I can say word that is client without that problem for nullable. And I think think, in my opinions, it's an internal thing. So I already handled the null situation. So why should I bother? Okay, in the next video, we will come back and add the component and component container class. Now, these two are a very base utility thing that you can have, but if you use it wisely, it can be very powerful.
If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.